I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Emily.
What is your name?
I'm Emily.
You're Emily? This is my daughter Emily. So she's a little bit of a goofball. I think she's a little delirious. She's actually got a part in a play for her school called Matilda. And she is playing what part?
Oh, Lavender.
Lavender. So she's playing Matilda's best friend, and her best friend is actually playing Matilda, which is kind of fun. Anyways, today we are here to introduce the sew along for View D of the new Brenda Brief. And this is that design. Okay, switch over the camera. This piece is a lower rise brief. This has a large lace panel on the side, and it is all one piece here. I do recommend you using fold over elastic on the legs and not using any other finishing. This is a little bit challenging to do, so definitely pay close attention when we're actually working on these closure points to make sure that everything is finished properly. I hope you enjoy the video, and comment if you have any questions, and make sure to subscribe so you get notifications from my next video. Thanks for watching. For View D, we also are going to use the lace edge down here at the bottom. And just as I've done all the other ones, I'm just going to kind of fold this over, matching up my edges, even though it's not necessarily a completely repeating pattern. Let's see if I start it where the three little bubbles are there, and end it. Let's see if I can do the same thing so I can have it. So it's, no. I think for this one I'm going to have to cut each piece separately. So I'm trying to bring the top of the scallops up to that line. Kind of coming the best I can to kind of meet the two peaks up where that point is. Okay, so now this one was a little bit trickier, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over and actually just try and match the pattern, so kind of forgetting what I've got going on there. So this is a little harder because I might actually just do this with scissors, because I'm mirroring my lace and not following. And there we have all of our pieces for View D. So I have all of the pieces for View D cut out and all prepped. The back is sitting up here. I'm going to go ahead, and before I add any laces or elastics, I'm going to attach the crotch lining and self to the garment. So we're going to do this with the right side facing each other. Poke myself. Hopefully I won't bleed, because that won't be pleasant because I'm working with white. Okay, so then you're going to place your right side facing the front on the back side of this. Okay, So now I'm going to look at this piece, and I'm going to attach the back at the bottom seam. And we do this with the right sides facing each other. So this one's a little bit harder for me to tell, and I can't tell it under these lights, so I am just picking a side and going with it. If this is something you're giving to somebody and not for yourself, then you might want to take a little bit more time dealing with it. So I'm going to roll the back together, the front together, and flip this over so then we can clean finish the front and back seams. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and work on sewing these, and then we'll come back and we'll work on attaching the laces and the elastic. Okay, for view C, we have to attach this the same way we have done for view A and B, and they're all pretty much the same. We're starting at the lining to make sure that we have a clean finish on the front and back seams. So I've also flipped it so the flimsier fabric, the stuff that moves around, is on the top, and I'm going to make sure that the blade is all the way up so I can slide this in as far as I can. I can also use the tip of the pin to help kind of guide and make sure the fabric is in the right place. Our stitch is at 3/8 of an inch, so I know that my machine does kind of a narrow 1/4 of an inch, so I'm actually going to chop off a fat 1/8 of an inch. So you just want to make sure that your stitch hits right at that 3/8 of an inch, because that's how the pattern was designed. Okay, now same thing on the back. Shake the pattern, so shake the pieces so everything's at the one end. Get my blade up. And I'm going to use my pin to help guide it in there, because that looked like that moved on me. And towards the end here, the fabric's starting to go all over the place, so I used my pin to help guide that. Okay, so we have the front and back clean finished, and we'll go to the table and we'll work on the next step. So last but not least, this is view D. So how this one is going to work is that we actually need to sew our side seams together before we can attach any type of lace to it. So we're going to pin this at the side. And then once we have these side seams stitched together, then we can take and we can apply the lace to this. Okay, well, I decided to go ahead and just do this tiny little stitch on the side seam without filming it. I felt it was more time efficient. And I did this backwards. Yep, I did it backwards. That's okay. It's going to be a design detail, and technically when I sew this on, this should not be visible at all, so I'm not too concerned about this. Because with the fold over elastic I'm recommending is the 20 millimeter, and so you should actually not see anything at the side seam of this white fabric. So I'm not worried that I just did it totally wrong. Okay, so I'm gonna trim up all of these thread tails and double check that the lining pieces, they work together well, they come close to the edge, and we're not going to have any issues. So I'm looking right here, and this probably would have been better to do before I sewed the side seam. I'm just going to trim this lining bit down just a little bit. And then we have this here too. Okay, so now we're going to do what we did on for view B, is we're going to take our fold over elastic and we're going to fold it and we're going to start stitching it so that notch is about a ½ inch before the end of this. Now let's see if I can pin it and you can see it when I set it back down. Almost like we're going to kind of split and fold that over. So I'm going to show you, kind of see. So we're just going to fold it over the edge, and then we're going to go from here all the way to the back seam here before we apply our lace to it. And we're just going to zigzag this all the way down. We'll go over to the zigzag machine and take care of that. This one may be a little bit harder to see with the white on white. So we've got this all prepped. So we have the fold over going over that little notch. And I'm going to just get this in my machine and do a couple stitches to make sure it's all kind of before I really start working with the fold over. Make sure it's going to go through the machine. There it is. Sometimes I have to give my thread a little tug. So depending on the fold over elastics you use, you may want to give it a little tug as you're pulling. This elastic is actually one that I carry in my shop, and I do know for a fact that this one will shrink slightly after washing. So you don't really need to pull this one. You can if you're more comfortable doing it. It just may be a little bit more snug at the very end. But I also don't like to really pull it around the crotch area because you don't want things to kind of rub you in the wrong way. So I'm not doing a whole lot, if anything. And I'm back over to the other notch, so I'm just going to kind of run this off. Okay, perfect. Now we're ready to attach the lace to the side. Okay, with the elastic finished around the leg, we are now going to attach the lace. And the rest of the fold over will be in a little bit. Okay. Okay, so the shapes, the shorter side goes towards the front. Now what we're going to do here is this is going to be just a little tricky. So clip my threads first because I don't want to deal with those. Come on, really? I think my thread nippers are on their way out. Okay. So what I'm going to do is okay. So right here, we're going to fold this over and we're going to line this up kind of right to the edge of where this fold over elastic is. Now we want to do this because we actually want to stitch where these two are coming together. So when we open it up, we have a nice clean finish here. So I'm going to start that. I'm actually just going to get a couple pins in going around the leg. Just going to get maybe 3. Because then I'll deal with the curve around, because I didn't mark the notch on this one like I did on the other piece. Okay, and then we come back to the back where we also have that piece of elastic, and I'm going to have it so this edge is coming all the way over here. So the edges over here line up. And then I'm going to put a couple pins going this way. I'll probably get about 3 or 4 pins on the back side. And now I'm going to flip this so I can kind of see where this lace is and see where I need to line this up. So now we do have that seam, and don't worry, it's going to be hidden because that is really just a kind of as a placeholder to hold this down. And I kind of get that matching all the way around. So another pin here, another pin on this curve. Okay, that side is ready to go. Now this side, we're going to do the same thing. My daughter's creeping over here. What are you doing, honey?
Grabbing a piece of paper.
Is that my paper? My printer paper?
Yes.
What are you doing with my printer paper?
So I can make party invitations.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I have now that pinned and this pinned. So I'm ready to go and actually the first thing I'm going to do before I sew this with an overlock, I'm going to come in with a straight stitch and actually stitch it right here, right here, right here, and right here, because I want those points to be perfect and I don't want to mess it up. And if I just start sewing it, one of these pieces can move, and I really want to have that be a nice, clean, pretty finish. Okay, I'm turning off my zigzag. And so now what I'm going to do right here is I want to try and stitch right at that 3/8 and just kind of do a little reinforcement. So I know everything's going to line up perfectly. So I did it about the width of the fold over. Did that move on me? Kind of. Okay, now I'm ready to go to the overlock machine and finish up those 2 seams. Okay, so now I'm going to start sewing it with my white side facing up because that fabric's flimsier and I want to make sure that it doesn't kind of stretch out of place. Make sure that needle, that blade is up. And then just start sewing. Be careful you're not cutting out, sewing over any pins. One side down. Looking good. Okay, so we're almost done with this one. This one we're going to sew our fold over elastic in the round. And how I want to do that is I want to put my fold over elastic together, and we're going to be stitching it together so it's kind of straight. Attaching them together about 3/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch. This is a little bit flexible because it is stretch, so you can kind of play around with it a little bit. So we don't have to have such a big seam allowance, it's going to be tiny. And then what we're going to take is we're going to kind of fold that kind of in half, and then we're just going to try and bind this all the way around. So now we want to work on kind of sectioning it off on here. So if I find kind of the center point, I'm going to kind of flip this off slightly center because I don't want to have that seam right at that side seam. And then I can kind of take and line up. So I'm going to go kind of the wrong side of the elastic towards the wrong side of the panty. And now over here, we're going to try and do that over here too. So we're kind of coming in, I've kind of press that seam open. So we kind of get that. I usually like to section off in 3 quarters. So I kind of get my quarter going. So right about here would be right about there. And then right about here is right about there. Okay, you can then go and kind of, well, actually that wasn't very evenly spaced. Okay, that can go right about here. So you can tack it down if you want to in the quarter spaces. I'm just going to kind of double check and look at my back. It looks pretty good. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to just kind of fold this over. Now on the side, remember how I sewed that wrong? Well, my fold over elastic is big enough that it's actually going to get to go right over that seam. And so I'm just going to I'm going to get that folded right there. So I've got it folded over the edge. I'm going to take here, I'm also going to fold this right over the edge. So I kind of get them kind of quartered and folded properly. And then back here as well. So I'm kind of taking that crease right over. Now you can put as many pins in this as you want to. I like to kind of stretch as I go. So let me get my zigzag stitch back. And I'm gonna just start. Doesn't really matter where. I might start at this back one right here because there's very little going on that I have to worry about. So I always start with my needle in the fabric just to kind of get it started. Do a couple stitches, take my pin out, and then I'm really just going to kind of stretch and get it to that next point. clip up all my threads. But this is officially finished.